Hi, I'm Dr. Gaby Cora, and welcome to my show, Dr. Gaby's Take, Make Life Interesting. Okay, now let's bring an eye into the future. What do you foresee for the Hispanic community overall, you know, thinking 10, 20, 30, 50 years ahead? And you just gave us a glimpse.
Well, we've already seen the effect of the Latin culture on the non-Hispanic culture. You know, they just came out with a dulce de leche Cheerios. You know, so we have J-Lo and Marc Anthony, and we have, you know, Antonio Banderas, and we have all the music. There's such an interest in you know, all of this, the Spanish hip hop, and so it's really it's kind of taking the place of just, you know, African American really owned the music world. Well, it's changing a lot. So I think that being Latino, or being connected to that culture is going to be more and more acceptable. In 10 years, I think that we're going to see a lot of change. I think this is the decade of the Hispanic. For sheer numbers, the Hispanic population has to be communicated with and invited to join. Because if you look at it, you know, our non-Hispanic population is aging quickly. Who's going to be supporting us? This, you know, boomer generation as it gets older. It will be those minorities.
Now, this is an interesting point, too. You know, we know that from a cultural perspective, the U.S. culture tends to be a certain way with the elders, whereas the Hispanic culture tends to be a bit different. What have you noticed? Well,
you know, we've worked for a few companies that have centered around the elderly. For example, WellCare. They did an excellent job, for example, of really listening to us to better understand their elderly community, especially when it comes to health. But what is so different is that the respect that Hispanics have for the elders. And that goes across the board. From Argentina to Mexico, Dominican Republic, elders are well respected and taken care of. You know, you're never going to, you know, if you're a Hispanic grandchild or child, you're not going to say, Mom, Dad, I'm going to put you in a home. Because that's just not even thought. I mean, it's not even considered. You know, and I think that with the non-Hispanic population, you talk about moving into assisted housing or assisted living situations, and, you know, you might go into a nursing home, and that just won't happen, because how can you possibly let abuelita go live with these strangers when you can take much better care of her at home?
With your food.
With your food and your care and besitos and novelas and all of that. So it's you know, you're taught to respect your elders from, you know, very early on. You know, and many cultures, Latin cultures, for example, won't look at their elders eye to eye, because that's considered rude. So they might lower their head when they're speaking to their grandparents. You know, remember, I'm sure you've seen it on American TV, is look me in the eye. You know, that's very, very non-Hispanic. That's very uncomfortable for a Hispanic child. Happens in schools all the time. Kids who are born here, you know, go to school, and they, you know, they don't look their teacher in the eye because they are supposed to respect her. So that's, you know, another example of you know, how to treat elders.
Well, it's interesting that even in the language, there's a difference. If you're speaking to someone else, you would call someone else who's a little older a certain way as compared to someone else who's younger. In English, we just call everyone you.
Right, exactly.
But in Spanish,
and tú,
right, you have you make the difference. You know, if they look like they're 35 or older, you would never call them just like you, as you would call a friend who's 10, 15, or 20.
Yeah, and sadly that's changing. You know, we're seeing that change, and you know, but it's still, you know, if you're in a big city, you know, you're starting to see a lot of people using the very familiar form of you, which is tú, and I hate to see the usted, you know, go to the wayside, because I think it's a very nice, subtle way of showing respect.
Thank you for watching my show. I hope you enjoyed Linda Lane Gonzalez interview as much as I have. And now let's look into ways in which we can apply these lessons learned and make our life even more interesting. So the different things we learned today was, the first one, think about the language. How can you enrich your knowledge of a second language? Let's say it's Spanish. Well, the first thing you can do is listen to this very same interview in its Spanish version. I also have additional interviews in Spanish so that you can check those out. And that may be a way in which you can draw the parallel between the English and the Spanish version, the different styles. So go and learn on your own. The second one is be more open toward watching some other Spanish shows on television, particularly in areas that you're very interested in. So that may be another opportunity there about learning the language. Of course, you can always take formal lessons, and that's one way to go, particularly when you want to learn the grammar. But the second part that is probably even more important than just learning how to speak the language 100% well at all times is becoming more open and more aware about the culture. If you have some interest, if you are curious about learning more about the Hispanic culture, you can always get started with the great food. You can try this by going to different kinds of restaurants. Again, remember, Cuban food is very different from Mexican food, which is very different from Puerto Rican food. There may be some things that are quite similar, but there's many differences too. So be open to that experience. Dance, of course. How about music? Of course. You will have some rhythms that are very particular about many of these cultures. So that cultural awareness, that wanting to learn more about the Hispanic culture will definitely enrich your opportunities. The third part that could help you enrich your opportunities would be around formal education. So not only going back to school if that's what you want to do, particularly if you want to learn more about the language or about the culture itself, but travel can also enrich tons of your opportunities, particularly if you avoid going to mostly American restaurants while you're, for example, in Spain. You may really want to go and try a great Spanish place and or other great areas within the countries that you visit. So avoid trying to do it all American so that you are more open to the experience. That's something to think about. Nothing beats immersion, being in a place for a while, at least a month, I would say, to make a difference. And again, don't assume that because you've been in one place for a month, everybody else is the same. There's plenty to visit, there's plenty to continue to learn and make life interesting. Thank you for joining me and enjoy.